Steve Pokin in the studio with us, now of the Springfield Daily Citizen. You probably know him formerly of the Springfield News Leader, the answer man poking around. Thanks for making time for us today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's great to be here.
We were talking a little bit earlier, and you have about 4 decades of experience in the journalism field, and now you have joined the Springfield Daily Citizen, which I was reading is owned or at least started by the guy who hired you previously at News Leader. Is that right?
Yeah, David Steffler. This is the second time he's hired me, and the third time I've worked for him. I worked for him in St. Charles, Missouri, and then he came out to the News Leader when he was the executive editor. He hired me. Then he left the paper and left Springfield. Then he was called back by some people in the community to start a nonprofit, the Springfield Daily Citizen. And I was hire number one.
Hire number one. And you took over with you Jackie Raywald.
Jackie Raywald, you got that right.
It's because I listened to an interview earlier and I heard you correct someone. I thought, you know what? I'm not getting that wrong.
Yeah.
So the Springfield Daily Citizen is a nonprofit approach to journalism. We're seeing kind of this rise of independent journalism coming up really across the country. I'm from a broadcast news background, and I've seen a lot of my colleagues across the country say, you know what? I'm going independent. I'm going to be nonprofit. Here's how you can support me. Why do you think this was necessary here in Springfield, here in Southwest Missouri?
Well, the what's happened with the local newspaper, the News Leader, has happened across the country. Is there are different streams of revenue. I've been around long enough where classifieds used to be a major source of income. Department stores. I think print is still holding its own with autos, and especially here in Springfield, with the News Leader has a very strong support from Murney Real Estate. But the traditional sources of revenue have gone elsewhere. There's most of them are online. You can find cars online. You can find a lot of things online. So that model is just barely hanging in there, and newspapers, including the News Leader, are trying more and more to enhance their digital footprint and their digital revenue. But more and more, as you say, there's a different way to do this. There's a way to rely on the people in Springfield, the donations, subscriptions, grants, for the community to support what we do.
Do you think, because I think there's been a conversation surrounding this when it comes to journalism, I think more so on a national level, that advertisers can in some ways influence the way stories are presented, whether that be through certain fact selection or how a story is told or anything like that? In your experience, do you see that kind of on a local level, or do you see that at all on a national level? Tricky questions.
Oh, well, let me think about that. I've been at this 40 years. I have never written a story that was dictated by an advertiser. If that had happened, I would have quit, because I know that there are places you can work that don't do that. The papers where I've worked have done a good job of separating that. I think when I first started out, I worked for a paper that when you did business stories or business profiles, they only had to be somebody who was advertising with the paper. I can't really remember whether I did any of those stories. I worked at a small paper in Southern Illinois years ago where we didn't have a staff photographer. So every once in a while, and I'm going to take you way back here. We had a dark room.
I know what you're talking
where
about.
We developed film.
Yeah.
And so everybody on the news staff, including me, knew how to shoot photos and develop the film. And
the original multimedia journalist.
Absolutely.
To some extent.
So I remember back then, every once in a while, there'd be an emergency where one of the reporters had to go out and take a photo of the Toyota sale-a-thon or something like that for the advertising department. But we didn't have to write a story.
I know there was one time as I was leaving a news station, because in journalism you kind of go through them. I had done a story on this place that was going to be the largest attraction in the area by size-wise. and they were kind of in conflict with one of our advertisers. And my boss at the time, after I left, said, "Hey, this advertiser is upset that you did this story. Can you please pull it down?" And I explained to that person why I was not going to do that and how that crossed journalistic bounds. So I've had personal experience, but I also think it came from kind of a bit of an unintentional ignorance from management, where they see potential sales dollars going out the window. And then, I see it from a journalistic standpoint. And eventually they were like, "You know what, you're right," and back down. But I often wonder if that comes into play. So I want to talk about the Springfield Daily Citizen. You're free to the public. People can subscribe if they want to, all online, correct?
Yeah, it's there's no print product.
Yeah, which cuts down on cost, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And so you guys say on your website your goal is to inform our community and to be a catalyst for good. And then your vision is to reinvent local news in Metro Springfield. You want to bring light to issues, encourage discourse, and inspire citizens to take action. Can you kind of expand on, obviously journalism brings a lot of light to issues, but the encouragement of discourse, especially on a product that is primarily online, is solely online? Because I've noticed as a consumer of news and a once contributor to news that people often seek out echo chambers, and they kind of get confirmation bias. Right. Well, this says what I believe, it must be true. Or this person in the comments says what I believe, it must be true. So when you talk about encouraging discourse, what's the approach for the Springfield Daily Citizen? I mean, is it a free-for-all and people can just say the craziest things? Or when you say discourse, what does that mean?
Well, it's not a free-for-all, because right now we do not have, people cannot comment on our website. On our website. Right. It is we're trying to take a more measured approach. We are not going to endorse candidates. We're not going to endorse like issues like bond issues. What we are going to try to do is to try to explain as much as we can what the issues are. Talk to sources on both sides of the issue. And then really focus on stories. My colleague Jackie Raywald had a story about a program called Restore, where there's a mechanism now to try to help fix up some older houses that have either been abandoned and perhaps there are squatters in them. But that part of that story is going to be how you can help, how you can get involved. If you want to get involved in the helping the unsheltered in the community, we're going to point out ways to do that. And hopefully we're also going to get involved in, rather than a lot of times focusing on perhaps one person who is had an interesting and a tough life being unsheltered, to draw back and try to get the bigger picture in terms of what policies are in place, and could possibly a change in policy make things better. So I think it's more in-depth, more big-picture stories.
And I noticed that as I was reading a few of the articles online, there's meat to the stories. It really feels like the journalists at the Springfield Daily Citizen have the opportunity to dive in. It's not a turn and burn, meet this hard deadline situation. So if you want to dig deep into something, you guys have it there. And I found that to be really refreshing. Well,
thank you. Yeah. I mean that's our intent. Our intent is to spend a little more time, and perhaps every once in a while come up with something that people really haven't even thought of. I've got some ideas of my own that I think are going to be interesting to people. And I was hired October 1st, and we just launched this week.
So it's been in the making.
It's been in the making, yeah. And I lobbied hard to get stuff on our temporary website before we actually launched this week, because I felt there were certain things that that really couldn't wait, and I just like to. I like to believe I had a following going into the Daily Citizen, and I didn't really want to cut that off entirely. I wanted people to be able to see that, I haven't retired.
Yeah.
And I still run into people say, how's retirement? Well, I haven't really retired.
Still cranking out stories.
I'm still cranking out stories.
Platform.
So I've done some profiles. I thought, like in October, what good can have a nice long shelf life and until January, February. So I've profiled a couple people, and I'm really excited about those stories. And one is on Pastor Christy Love, who's worked a lot with the unsheltered here in Springfield. And the other one is on Chancellor Hal Higdon, who I don't think a lot of people know much about him as a person. Not just what he does at the community college, but his life history.
Is he at OTC?
He is at the Chancellor at Ozarks Technical Community
Off the chain community college is what I always called it.
Oh, never thought of that.
Yeah,
and he came here in 2006, and he was the youngest community college president, and now at 60 he is the longest tenured in Missouri.
So he's been here for a while. I'll come have you just come a little closer to you. If you need to pull it to you, you do whatever you need to get. Just want to make sure our audio is good.
So then, I think some of those stories and profiles have a dozen, 15 sources that I really had the time to, and to me, it's always a challenge not just to write the story, and you always got to get the facts straight, but I like to spend some time crafting it, writing it in a way that's engaging, capturing an image, capturing maybe using words in a slightly different way than you would expect.
And I noticed that about your articles a lot, but I want to go back to what you mentioned about sourcing, 12 to 15 sources.
Yeah.
That's incredible. The standard for people who don't know is like 2 or 3.
Right.
If you can get that. So you guys are really well sourced. And that's something that I noticed in a couple of the articles that you had written that I was reading this morning on the website was it's not just sourced, it's linked. So if you want to go back and you want to double check that source, your reader has the opportunity to double check you, which is refreshing, I think.
Yeah, and we're encouraged to link and list all kinds of other media outlets, including the News Leader, that have written about this in the past and would shed light on the topic. I have to admit my bias is initially is when I'm linking to the News Leader. I'm looking for Jackie's stories and my stories, so I'm linking to things that we've written, but not just that.
You know those stories personally too.
Yeah, those are the ones I remember. But then I do link to other reporters. They do a great job with the staff they have. So we do in the Missouri Independent, and we'll link to all kinds of different media sources.
Do you think that, I know the conversation has been out about long form versus a shortened attention span. Do you think that the readers have a shortened attention span? And I'll divulge myself. This morning I was a little late for work because I spent an extra 10 minutes reading a New York Times article that a friend in New York had sent me, and it was wildly fascinating. So I kind of pushed back against this idea that readers, viewers, listeners only want a 7-second story. They only want the bare minimum. What are you guys kind of expecting and seeing over there?
Well, I do believe in long-form journalism, and the New York Times does that, I think, better than anybody. Their stories are just amazing. But with that comes, it's the responsibility of the writer and the editor to make it engaging. Mm-hmm. Not only with your words, but with the presentation online. We have a managing editor who is just fantastic. David Steffler hired her away from the Los Angeles Times.
Oh, wait, what?
Yeah.
So you guys have someone who's your managing editor who's from the LA Times, which is probably one of the top 5 largest newspapers in the country, right?
We did that. Yeah.
My goodness.
David did that. Her name is Brittany Meiling, and she basically, in large part, created our website. And I am just, I don't know how to do much of that. I write them, but it really looks sharp. So if you are going to do long-form journalism, how it's presented makes a lot of difference. Mm-hmm. There have been times over my career where I've done long-form journalism, and it starts on page 1, and then you open it up, and my heart just sinks because it's like we call it the jump when it goes from page 1. The jump is like 60, 70 inches, almost an entire page of just type.
Yeah.
And that is intimidating for a reader. So we're going to do long-form journalism. We're going to have fact boxes. We're going to have great photos. We've hired some of the best freelancers in the area. Mm-hmm. We do not have a full-time photographer, but we do have a reservoir of freelancers, including Dean Curtis, who shot for the News Leader. He's in the Missouri Photojournalism Hall of Fame. Bruce Stidham, a guy named Jim Wilson. They're great.
So you guys are going to not only bring the element of excellent writing, which from what I've seen so far, it really is there, but then that visual aspect as well, which I can think back to stories that I have seen where a story is told through the photo, and it's like you really have the opportunity to do that.
I'm going to plug my profile of Christy Love. It took a while, but Christy goes out on the coldest nights to provide mission work and to people unsheltered, living under bridges, living under tarps. Mm-hmm. And I went out and I knew what I was going to see, and on a really cold night. But when I saw it, I just could not believe. And she meets them with the question, "What do you need? Do you need gloves? Do you need a coat? Do you need you need a cup of coffee? Do you need a hot cup of soup?" And I went out with Dean Curtis, and he had some obstacles in that. First of all, it's at night.
Yep.
Second of all, the stipulation with Christy was you don't show any faces mm-hmm. unless the person is willing to do that, mm-hmm. To be photographed so you can recognize their face, and you don't give away locations of where these homeless camps might be. So Dean went out and he said, "Well, we'll see what we got," and he submitted his photos. They are fantastic.
Oh, okay. So this is one of the first profiles that you did.
Yeah, I last I saw, I think it was going to be posted today, but I'm not sure.
Okay,
it's coming. It's coming soon.
Okay, and so that's really interesting that you took the perspective of an individualized helper, because I know when I was a journalist and we would cover the homeless situation, the unsheltered situation, you kind of had to take it from a broad group. Maybe you found one individual who was experiencing that, and you get that personalized approach. But I like what you were saying earlier. It's like a whole approach to the story, like what led to this, which is often something I think people forget about, that there is a domino effect. People don't just wind up unsheltered. There's a domino effect that is associated with it. So I like that you guys are utilizing your platform over at the Springfield Daily Citizen to show the domino effect and not just the smidgen of it. So I'm excited to see that profile come out.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
One of the articles that you recently wrote had to do with some graffiti on the Galloway Trail. I was reading about that this morning.
Yeah, today, yeah.
Yeah, the patriotfront.us or us, however,
right,
on the group. And that I like that you have this ability to write about serious stories, but then there are also like little jabs in there that are funny. Like your writing really is entertaining. So how did you get there as a journalist? Have you always kind of had this JK LOL approach to stories where you could shine humor where maybe other people couldn't see it?
You have to bet. I know what the LOL is.
Laugh
JK?
out loud.
Yeah, the JK?
Joke.
Oh, okay.
Just making a joke.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I've always been drawn to writing. I knew in my career, even as in high school, that whatever it involved, I'd have to write. And in this particular case with that story, it's graffiti basically,
mm-hmm. Which you will see on Galloway Trail on the bridge, because the Galloway Trail goes under the bridge,
right?
And I'll see it there occasionally. I too will run out there every once in a while, but I've not seen that one yet.
I am so impressed that you're a runner. Wow,
I'm telling you.
I didn't want to write that in terms of doom and gloom. This right-wing supremacist group is going to take over Springfield, because that's not the case at all. Basically, somebody's going out there on the trail probably in the dead of night and in a place that gets very little traffic, putting up there, promoting a hate group. Who does that?
I checked out their website and I was like, these guys kind of look like Antifa. Like you could only see like the smidgen of their eyes. You don't really know who they are. If they're just donning red, white, and blue colors, as opposed to the traditional black of the Antifa side. So that was interesting. So now people can see what this group is. And because of your reporting, they don't have to fear because they seem to be kind of a fringe group.
Yeah, and the News Leader, I linked to 2 News Leader stories where this group was just recently. They were putting up stickers on the Missouri State campus. And then I think in July of 2020, very briefly, they unfurled a banner on the Kansas Expressway that wasn't up there very long. So I'm thinking there's a couple of people who are into this.
I've always thought that groups that try to band together or encourage other people to support them with stickers are like the kids that didn't get stickers growing up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
Do you have thoughts on the current state of journalism? Because a lot of people have lost trust in the traditional news, if you will. Do you kind of have thoughts on how that can be re-won by the public and how it's even done? Is it done through nonprofit kind of independent journalists, independent news sites like what you guys are offering to the Springfield area? It's Springfield Daily Citizen.
Well, yeah, we hope to build trust. I think we're going to do that. We have a terrific staff, and my take on that is print. And even though I'm not print anymore, but I'm a product of print, and the people I work with were print journalists. My view from the inside is it is objective. It is. You make a lot of mistakes over my career in 40 years because you're biased and you got fired. You didn't get rewarded for misleading people, which a lot of media outlets do. If you get big numbers and it doesn't really matter if it's right or not, you're a star. My experience in print is you get things wrong, you're done. And we make a great effort at the Citizen, at the News Leader, at papers, at the New York Times to get things right. I mean, there are in fact libel laws. The New York Times was just sued by Sarah Palin. You are held accountable. In my experience as a reporter over 40 years, the definition of what a news outlet has greatly broadened to that there are entities that have a voice, a slant. And I know some of the probably conservative listeners are saying that the lamestream media has a slant.
And I think in journalism, for me, I would get called a slur Republican or a slur liberal. And I knew if both sides were coming at me, I was right where I needed to be.
Yeah. If you're getting it from both ends, you're doing your job right. So,
do you think, though, that the media, and I always use air quotes because what even is that?
That's a great question. Yeah, it can mean.
Do you think that there's an opportunity to win back that trust?
Yeah, I do. And I, like you, when people ask me about the media all the time, and I, who are you talking about? The media. Are you talking about the New York Times? Are you talking about
Facebook?
Like
Facebook? Who are you talking about? KY3? Who is it?
Were you talking about back then? Were you talking about Rush Limbaugh? Because he was part of the media.
It's such a big umbrella term.
It's such a big umbrella so that it's meaningless. So when you ask me, can we bring it back? I narrow that down. And all I can tell you is that the Springfield Daily Citizen will be a trustworthy news source. We're going to do that here in Springfield.
What is your approach to headlines? Because oftentimes I have seen on a local, a national, or even a regional level where it almost feels like clickbait headlines are being written. And through those misleading headlines, people are forming an opinion and they never even open the article. So what's your approach to writing headlines that are honest, yet still inviting for the reader to learn more?
I agree with your observation, is that even in print, that headlines are more and more written to get you to read more rather than to fully explain what the story is so you can make a decision whether or not you're going to read it. Because we want you to click on it so that it's recorded as another person read this story. I think we have to do a better job of avoiding that. But at the same time, I have to clarify that in that I write a column called The Answer Man, where somebody asks me a question. I never answered it in the headline.
No, but you weren't dishonest.
Right. Because reader wants to know what's going in at Sunshine and National or something like that. So I say, if the headline says "come and go," going, that's it.
Right. But if someone else has also had that same question, they're likely to click on that article and read. But you're not telling people what to believe based on the headline. And I've seen that.
But to prove your point that people don't read any further a lot of times is I would write Answer Man stories, post my line with the headline being a question, the question that was asked me, and there would be comments was, "Oh, I bet it's this, I bet it's that, oh, it's this, I bet it's that," and they were all wrong because they hadn't read the story.
That was something too when you talk about Answer Man or Pokin' Around, which I love both of those segments that you had done for the News Leader, and I look forward to seeing more of those with the Springfield Daily Citizen. I always felt like Pokin' Around was similar to my style, which was I wanted to leave the audience going, I didn't know that. I'm glad I know that now. It wasn't always going to be hard, but it was always going to inform you. Do you feel like that was your approach, or was that a misread on my behalf?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. I didn't write about politicians or politics that much. I'm not a political junkie, but when I did, my view had to be pretty strong. Like if I felt 60-40 on, I'm not going to write about it. But if I think somebody's way out of line, or a city did something, or the efforts to recall a mayor, it was in Nixa because he wanted masks in public places.
Oh, they tried to recall him over that?
Yeah, and it failed.
Yeah.
So if I really felt strongly, I wrote about those issues. But a lot of times it was things that just interested me, and if I were to write 3 or 4 columns very serious in a row, I just need to write something that I think is humorous
to lighten up a little bit. I understand that completely, and that your interest in those stories, I felt like always comes out in the writing. You do such a wonderful job. You're a great writer. And I think that's going to attract people to the new startup, really.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can be competitive here in Springfield when it comes to kind of luring away an audience from other outlets in the area, whether that be TV or that be print?
I have no doubt that we're going to be competitive. I was at the News Leader for almost 10 years. I've lived in this community. In part, it's the general decline of the print industry, but here in Springfield, they made a decision that just really hurt them when they shut down our press in 2020. And that was part of, Gannett was bought by Gatehouse, and so they actually kept the Gannett name, even though the purchaser was Gatehouse. And part of that savings that they wanted to get was closing down our press, which was a thoroughbred, which was terrific. And the paper was moved to Columbia, where there was a Gatehouse press, not nearly as good. It screwed up the deadlines. It was unreliable. So in answer to your question, do you think we're going to be competitive here? For a variety of reasons, including the fact that a corporate decision made by Gannett to shut down that press is going to make us even more competitive than we already are.
Do you have a thought about these large media outlets coming in and then owning a huge share of area news. I look at some owners and they will come in and they own 100 TV stations across the country or even more. And what they do is they strip down the newsroom to bare bones to where the news room doesn't have the resources that they need to go out and properly cover their full market, which is the area that can see them on their TV screen. So then to supplement that, they pull from news on a national level. They pull from their national sources. And then you end up with a story about a turtle in Georgia over the local girl whose community is rallied together around her after a car wreck because it was too far to drive out to the small town community, but the resource was there to pull a turtle story from Georgia. Do you know what I mean? And then they don't pay these journalists anything, so they can't get anyone other than people right out of college who don't have the news nose that is needed sometimes.
So I'm gonna tell another story that kind of to respond to that once again will show how old I am. When I started in this business, the papers I worked for were owned by families, and every once in a while, on a good day, you'd be in the office and you'd say hello to the person who actually owned the paper. Their goal back then was to make just enough money so that, fortunately, maybe you might have a child who wants to run the business, is interested in publishing or journalism, and so that they can have maybe a nice house in a nice neighborhood. And then Change said, we can make a lot more money off of this. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. And Gannett was the big dog. So that has changed where, even Gannett is struggling. And so when they you're the big decisions like shutting down our press, the News Leader press, that's made in a different time zone. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think that they knew that was just going to be so detrimental to the paper in Springfield, but it didn't matter.
They saved a few bucks.
The grand scheme of things, it didn't matter. They had no sense of the community. And corporations, not just in the news business, but particularly in the news business, where they look into a newsroom and they see a guy like me. Am I producing revenue? Technically, no. Unlike somebody who's in the advertising department with big accounts, bringing in furniture stores, grocery ads, car ads, I'm bringing in nothing. So when your choice is how do you increase revenue, and you can't think of anything, what do? You cut costs, and who do you cut? You cut the people who aren't really producing revenue, without the full realization that you're damaging irretrievably your product, which is news. And so that does happen. And this, I know this because this is local. Once again, I'm a local guy. Mm-hmm. It's happening throughout the industry. But at the News Leader in 1987, it's easy to remember, they had 87 people in the newsroom. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot for this area.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That place was packed.
Yeah.
It was, I'm guessing maybe 10 people on the sports staff. Mm-hmm. Now they got one guy who does a great job, Wyatt Wheeler.
But how does he cover all the area sports?
Yeah, he can't. It's triage. Yeah. And today they have 13. So
13 in the entire newsroom at News Leader?
13 at the entire newsroom, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
They're bigger than us.
But also, to go from 87 people to 13, your quality alongside your quantity of what you can cover, it has to decrease. The math isn't there. What seems frustrating for me is you look at these people and you say, well, why isn't this quality as good as what it was before? And it's like, well, you cut the staff from 87 to 13. Like, what do you expect? I'm not a genie.
To stand up for my friends at the News Leader is I think the quality is still there.
Right.
They can't cover the things that they once did. That's where I'm going with that. Is okay. The quantity is not quite there as much as they can't do the deep dives, the in-depth stories and that's primarily the gap that we're trying to fill is, the story that has 10 sources that takes you a while to put together, that takes you have to wait for the right moment, the right night, the right cold weather to get the best photos. That's the gap that we hope to fill, and I'm really confident we will fill.
Yeah, I think you will too. Your articles so far across the board, not just yours singularly, have been fascinating. I'm excited to see more of what you guys do over there.
Great. I'm glad you're so interested.
I love journalism. I still believe in it despite having a little bit of a chip on my shoulder sometimes. Is there anything else you want to say or add? And then I want to talk about kind of your most interesting stories that you've covered and what kind of interesting stories are coming down the pipeline for you.
No, not at this point.
Okay. What's your most interesting story that you think readers, they're going to want to click on?
I think the profile of Christy Love, how she got into the ministry, her childhood growing up. To me, one of the more interesting things is people ask me, is that really her last name? It's her married name. Mm-hmm. Her maiden name growing up was Drown. And she says that was a really difficult when she taught the swimming class to kids.
When is that article going to be out? Is that out today?
I should know this. I think it was coming out today, but I haven't really looked at our website. I'm just going to safely say it's coming out in the near future.
Okay, people can look for that. All right, thanks for being here today. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure. Yeah.